Welcome back to KTN Prime, and thank you for staying with us. Let's just start by recapping the latest news from the deliberations that were being held by transport sector stakeholders and the relevant government agencies in regards to the transport paralysis that was witnessed across the country today. And the latest, as we've mentioned time and time again, is that the transport sector strike over the high cost of fuel that is actually set to continue, rather, as stakeholders failed to reach an agreement, a consensus with the government, and officials after that meeting asked the operators to continue parking their vehicles as they try and push for better terms. And speaking of better terms, this is a hint of what the transport sector players were trying to push. We heard from Karakacha, who mentioned that they were trying to push for a reduction of up to 46 shillings in the price of fuel, but the government has maintained that 10 shillings is what they can actualize. So that might have caused a stalemate, even as the stakeholders said that the talks should resume hopefully tomorrow so that Kenyans can be helped to stop experiencing the aftershocks of the transport paralysis, which is set to continue even as of tomorrow. We were set to host a plethora of guests from the transport sector, but unfortunately most of them were caught up in that high-level meeting that was being held at the Transport Ministry offices just in Nairobi. And better late than never, we have one of the guests who's joined us. He's the chairperson of the Organization of Online Drivers. He's called Justin Nyaga, and he's equally a stakeholder in this field because they're standing in solidarity with the Matatu Owners Association and other members of the public transport sector, agitating for a reduction in fuel prices, or at least more measures to be put in place to actually ensure that the sector is not affected, even as Kenyans are reeling from the after effects of the high fuel prices. We'll equally be joined on phone by Ruth Kinyanjui, who's an economist, as we try to dot the I's, cross the T's on what exactly is happening. Is this a global issue? Do we have local solutions? And what more can the government do apart from reducing VAT, stabilizing the cost of fuel? I think up to 11 billion has been used, 6.2 billion in April and 5 billion in May to stabilize the cost of fuel. But let's start with the guest in studio. Nyaga, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for making time.
A pleasure to meet you too.
And we're not talking in good circumstances, especially for your members, the members of the Online Drivers Organization. We've just seen members of the Matatu Owners Association, including the Managing Director of Kenya Bus Services Management, Edwin Mukabana, who was set to join us right here. But as I mentioned, they were held up during that meeting and unable to make their way to studios. But since you're here, let's talk about what has not been agreed on so far. Stakeholders pushing for a reduction of up to 46 shillings, the government maintaining they can manage a 10 shilling reduction, which hasn't been gazetted. EPRA hasn't officially communicated that reduction. So we still continue with the prices as they are after they were reviewed on the 14th of this month.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to affirm that the Organization of Online Drivers, together with all digital cab drivers, we are in solidarity with the Matatus and long distance and other stakeholders to fight for this war. Actually, from yesterday, we had so many meetings to prepare for today, and our decision is intact. We want the government to lower the prices, and on our case is more even severe than the case of Matatus. When we talk of digital taxis, because our operation is somehow different from theirs. They have the capacity of making their own prices. You remember, this is not the first time for the fuel to go up. Previously, like 2 or 3 months ago, again, the fuel went up with some coins, and it affected our business a lot. So we are saying, in solidarity, we have to push for the fuel to go down with 46 shillings per litre. That is our start.
Is that a bare minimum, non-negotiable You're stuck at 46 shillings. That's what you agreed upon as stakeholders.
Actually, if you look at the business as it is right now, that is where we can fit at 46.
So if it's increased by 46 shillings, as transport sector players, you'll be able to deal with the shocks of price increment and whatnot. 46 shillings is where you're okay.
We are not very much okay, but at least we can fit. We can be able to manage.
It's workable.
It's workable.
So when
We
you
can
hear
manage.
10 shilling reduction, is that a drop in the ocean? Will it alleviate the pressures you're feeling as members of the transport sector?
It cannot. 10% is very little money compared with what they have done. And even before the reduction, I remember there was that rumor that the government pushed it to that level so that they can lower with the 10 shillings or 8 shillings or something. So we knew that they will lower with something small, but it will not come to where it was before.
And I know you weren't part of the negotiations, but ideally, some of these things actually need concession. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation, and it's all about strategic concession exchange. Are you ready to pull back in order to ensure that your members, the members of the Matatu sector, are actually back working? Because you can't work from home, if you get my drift. So everything is at a standstill. Your members are being affected. Are you able to give room in order for negotiations to take place and for stability and normalcy to resume?
Okay, on our case, we understand that our people are also suffering because they have bills to pay. The majority of them, they have services, loans to service, and all that.
Yeah.
But still, if you consider the whole thing is that if you allow the government to have negotiations aside, then it will cost us delay. That delay, because the government will relax after seeing that we have relaxed, then they will relax themselves. We are not ready to do that until we get what we want.
Okay, interesting. We happen to have an economist on the line, Ruth Kinyanjui. Allow me to interact with her briefly. So we get to identify the problem even before we talk of solutions. Ruth, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for making time. As I mentioned, you're joining us via way of phone, but let's start with the problems. We've had the government mention that, there's high inflationary pressures the world over. Economic growth projections have actually been reduced by institutions like the World Bank due to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. How much of this is a global issue? And I ask this because the government has mentioned that fuel landing costs have actually skyrocketed. And this mentioned a few years back, we had some members of the current administration actually pouring cold water on the previous administration, who was saying that the Ukraine war was a contributing factor to the rise in fuel prices. So talk to us. Who's fooling whom? How much of this is a global issue?
Thank you so much. And maybe just to say first, it's normal for wars and just to make the cost of fuel go up. We all know that. And even the global macroeconomic factors that affect us, whether it's through shipping, through expensive, conflict zones, or even through dollar and exchange rate issues, and even insurance premium. That is normal, and maybe the government could be experiencing that. However, from where I sit, I'm looking, there's something that has not been very clear, and this is where the Wananchi, I feel like they are coming in when it comes to the whole issues of domestic policy choices. Sometimes that can be a very subjective area that maybe the people in leadership can really dwell on, and maybe that's where the citizens are pushing, or people are pushing for accountability, because people will often feel really frustrated when government just blame global factors without taking internal consideration. Because you see, we are not looking back and saying what are the implications of the G2G kind of agreement that we had when we were doing the fuel previously in the last 3 years, for example. Even as the global prices go up, what were the policy issues that have affected the status quo that we are going through or we are undergoing right now? Because there's clearly a problem. I was just watching the live meeting with the stakeholders, and you could tell there's an area the government could not be able to explain. And when it's not explainable, then you can almost relate it to a political narrative that maybe the government is trying to push, because you see, citizens are asking hard questions, but nobody is actually coming out to say, where is the government trying to caution the common mwananchi? And as much as we know oil prices are affected globally by many macroeconomic factors, but we feel there are policy issues that maybe domestically haven't cushioned the common mwananchi properly, and that has caused prices to be more expensive in Kenya than any other place. So I feel there's still a section, or there's still a subjective area that the government is not able to explain.
Okay, Ruth, even before we get to G2G and whether it's serving its purpose, is the government doing enough currently to cushion Kenyans from the erratic price increments in the short term? Because we've seen a reduction of VAT to 8%. We've actually seen the government release tranches of cash, 6.2 billion in April, 5 billion in May, from the stabilization fund to actually reduce or cushion the price increment. What more can be done to ensure a reduction of up to, is it 40 shillings? That's what the public sector players are demanding for. What are their hands tied? Is a removal of taxes and levies from fuel products actually a go-to solution? And then how then do we plug that gap that will be left by this potential withdrawal?
I can say the issue at hand is huge, more so because fuel affects everything, especially in Kenya, and we've seen that. But I feel like there's a lot that needs to be done, especially. We haven't seen a proper fuel audit, especially on the value chains being really audited and us really finding where the issues are. Remember, this is not the first time we are going through the oil issues. We had the same in 2021 and 2022, if you can remember. That's like almost like 5 years ago. So this is a cycle. But the auditing of the value chains of the oil sector, whether it's the import cost, the damage storage, and the margin forex, all those, nothing has been put on the table. So it remains very subjective, and that is where common Kenyans are coming and saying something is not right. Even the taxes, something is not right. And of course, we also find the levies to be also very selective. There's a lot of selectivity when it comes to fuel prices, and that it looks like the common mwananchi cannot understand the criteria the government is using in getting the prices or putting the prices, the normal prices in the market. However, common mwananchi feels like the government feels that this is an area they can be able to reap because everyone benefits from the oil area. But more so, the government is not taking responsibility when it comes to the mistake that it could have actually done. And of course, there is no transparency. I can tell you we haven't seen any kind of transparency when it comes to stabilization formula. When it comes to the oil stabilization formula, it's either the government is giving a subsidy, it's either something is just happening, but it's not a clear picture that people can be able to properly put their hands on and be able to say that, yes, we can tell that this is the right prices. And of course, we haven't seen the kind of wasteful expenditure, especially on relief funds that maybe have been done previously, especially on subsidies. And of course, we haven't seen the intention of protecting the final consumer of the common Kenyan. So with that whole subjectivity, especially having an unclear value chain when it comes to fuel in Kenya, I think it's something that is concerning over the years for a very long time, and macroeconomic factors are just a blame that maybe comes into play. So from where I sit, I feel that there's a lot that can be done from a transparency perspective and accountability.
Transparency, accountability, that's an issue that needs to be looked at by the relevant officials. But briefly, from an economist point of view, we've had issues about zero VAT on petroleum products. Is this a logical solution to the issues we're facing? Because we've had time and time again is that so much of this price goes to the taxes, and some of it, of course, is attributed to the landing costs and the profit margins for oil marketers. But at the end of the day, is it a solution to zero-rate petroleum products?
I think it's not sustainable.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, there has to be a level of transparency when it comes to what is being taxed or not, or what is being subsidized or not. And one of the things that I go back to is lack of clear way in terms of, actually, from where I sit, I normally see fuel has a lot of political narrative. It depends on the narrative that is being driven. And there's a way, I feel there's still a way. I feel like there's a lot of inefficiency in how we've been doing our fuel policies. And as a result, that has hindered us being able to efficiently bring a normal kind of cost to fuel prices for common Kenyan, and maybe not wanting to have or to take the blame. The relevant ministries feel like they need to push back to the common mwananchi, and that's where the problem is. So I think it's high time, especially at this point in time, where price has increased with like over almost like 30-40%, everyone to take accountability, and actually the ministry also to be seen to bring solution and to be more transparent, because this is not an issue. It's a whole GDP issue. It's an inflation issue, and it's going to affect every person. And just to remind you that in Kenya every day, we normally, the output in terms of GDP is around 45 billion. So you can imagine if we are missing 45 billion a day, for example, today. And if that is going to continue in the rest of the week, you can be able to estimate how much that is going to cost. So we cannot afford not having accountability and transparency.
All right, that's well covered. Thanks for that. Is the G2G working from an economist's point of view? Has it stood the test of time? Because we heard from CS Mbadi today, Kenya pays about $88 per metric ton, which the government says is lower than our regional neighbors. Government says G2G has helped ease pressure on freight costs, on insurance charges, and equally because fuel is supplied without that immediate demand of payment in foreign currency, which sort of doesn't strain our reserves. From where you sit, are we better off with the G2G deal, or is liberalization of the oil sector the way to go?
G2G was good for strategic reserve, of course, and for forex stability. But however, you can see other governments around us have rejected that process, and because it's not working, I think that needed to be coupled with reintroduction of competitive tendering and proper, actually, it needed to have a proper introduction of competition, especially in volumes, and also ensuring that there is a publication of supplier margin. There has to be a margin that the government needs to ensure that it's publicized so that any person competitively bidding for that can be, it can be clear, it can be very clear. But G2G, it's actually the one that pushed us to the vagueness of what we are experiencing today. And from an economic perspective, I feel like G2G is what is causing us more problem today than it was actually then. Actually, we are cushioning, or we are going through the problems of G2G now. But the introduction of competitions ensure that there is a proper accountability, and also benchmark. We can be able to benchmark even with the countries around us. And let's also, the whole power of demand and supply. Sometimes the competition disciplines the market. The reason we are going through whatever we are going today is because G2G has enabled the lack of competition, which now we have to align with what is we are being given. It's either what you are being given or not, but there's something that comes with discipline of competition in the market.
Interesting. Let's see how the cookie crumbles, as they say. But as we finalize and briefly, I'm sure you've heard of the price disparity in the East African region. Kenyans are up in arms mentioning that, you know what, this fuel comes through Kenya, but we see the price disparity in neighboring countries, Uganda, Tanzania, you name it, and we happen to be the highest. But government has come out to mention that in some of these countries, without mentioning names, we've seen the rationing of fuel. You're told you can only buy so much in order to get people throughout till the end of the month. Others are forced to work from home. What do you make of the pay disparity and that price difference across the East African community?
Actually, it's not making sense. And I understand Kenyans from where they're coming from. And don't forget, just to remind you that we're in the finance bill process. So I feel like this is not an area that government should ignore. The finance bill is just going to the completion and it should be in the parliament. That it was tabled by the CS recently, like 2 weeks ago. So it's going to go through the parliament in a week or two. So with that in mind, so you can imagine Kenyans, it's a bad season for us to be going through what we are going. And the government, we cannot afford to be where we are, and especially with the demonstration and people feeling like the cost of living is really high and is being pushed high by the cost of oil. So I think the Kenyans are learned, they really compare, the analytics are all out there. I feel subjectivity should be removed out of the fuel issues, and accountability and competitive. Let the demand and supply and market equilibrium works towards normalizing the right price for the fuel in the country.
Thank you so much for your contribution right here, hoping that what we've said will actually be taken into action so we can see reprieve for the Kenyan households and those in the transport sector. Ruth Kinyanjui is an economist who was joining us via phone call, just picking her mind on a couple of issues to do with the transport paralysis and the cost of fuel in the country. I'm still in studio, joined by Justin Nyaga, who's the chairman of the Organization of Online Drivers. And Nyaga, we've heard from the economist, at the end of the day, what your members want is a reduction of fuel prices. Nothing more, nothing less. So with the government stonewalling these negotiations, what's the way forward? We understand strike is on. Are there members who are actually on the roads right now who belong to the online association?
Okay, I am not sure of that, but maybe we cannot miss one or two, because I also saw Matatus are on the road, one or two.
Yes.
But the majority of them are not on the roads.
Okay.
Like 90% or 85%, they are not on the roads.
Hence the price
we
surge
are in
and all that.
solidarity, yeah.
Okay.
And we want to make it real and to prove to the government that we are in serious need of this, the prices to go down. Again, you have to understand, my good friend, that in the Organization of Online Drivers, the drivers depend on the third party to make decisions for them in terms of pricing. So it is another thing. We have two elephants in the room. One, it is the fuel hike. Two, it is the same prices that we used to do in the last year, but one, we are still operating with the same prices. The application companies are not adjusting prices going up.
Why is that?
Actually,
the last time we talked, you said that you had talked to them. They're supposed to increase 2 weeks, I think a month or thereabout was the time frame. So is there any progress whatsoever in terms of reviewing the prices?
Actually, this is what it makes us to be more grieved, because you understand that the last time we spoke, I said we are talking to the government. We also went to an extent of talking to the CS, Bwana Chilchil, and he said he will write a notice to all the application companies so that they can adjust their prices, and he gave them a model that was coming from the AA, Automobiles Authority of Kenya, as a model to, as a guideline for them to adjust the prices. Again, they ignored the report or the request from the CS. And now again, we are on the roads. claiming the same prices to be adjusted, and they are reluctant. They are adamant, even as we speak. So we are asking, even when Matatus call off their strike, our strike will continue. I'm assuring you that. Until the application companies adjust the prices. Imagine until this time, we are getting a request of 130 shillings with the same prices that we are talking about.
And from that 130
It is
shillings,
so
how much
frustrating.
goes to the driver?
They are taking 21%
Okay.
as the commission, so we are taking 79% commission. I mean, the driver is taking 79. And now, from the 79%, you can imagine we are also, the other cost of running the car is also on the driver side. Now the fuel come to the tire, servicing, and all that. It is also a burden to the driver. So we are more grieved, and we are saying, even if Matatus say like today, we are waiting for them. Even they say they call off their strike for the digital cab drivers or the online taxi, we are going to continue with our strike until the prices are adjusted.
Well, unity is strength, as they say, but that's a story for another day. If I can quote the CS Mbadi, the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, he said that, in my view, the strike is completely uncalled for, even though the prices of fuel have gone up. My concern is that we are trying to solve a global problem, applying domestic means, which is not appropriate. So at the end of the day, how do we justify the strike being a legitimate response to government's indifference of the suffering of Kenyans, including the drivers, and not an emotional decision? Because that's what he was hinting at. This strike has been driven by emotions.
You know, somehow, the people that we are dealing with, and even the CS must know this, even the government, they are dealing with Kenyans, just normal people. They are not economists. They know nothing about what maybe the economist, madam, is saying.
Yeah.
They don't know. They only know the price is going up and it should go down. Again, they can only operate within their parameters, within what they know and what they are doing. So they know from point A to point B, I will take a passenger, I will get this amount of fuel and all that. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay. So the, last year, or maybe before the president comes to the seat, I remember that period, the season of President, the former president. The fuel went up to 200 and something shillings. And Deputy President by then, William Samuel Ruto, stood in the podium like this and said he believes it is not the chaos in Ukraine that are causing that. Okay. And I would like him to remember that. He promised that when he joins that seat, and that is why in solidarity we voted for him, expecting to have better results. He promised that once he joins there, he knows the mechanism. Now we want him to do what he promised us to do. He knows the formula, he knows the mechanism. We don't know, but we are expecting him to act and give us better results.
Okay, the buck stops with the relevant authorities, including the president. Do you believe, as we finalize, do you believe this matter has been politicized? We've heard today that disruption of transport services can only worsen the situation. We've heard from government that, you know what, this hints at economic sabotage, because at the end of the day, why didn't these transport sector players strike when the price increased during former President Uhuru Kenyatta's era, but they're striking right now when William Ruto is in power? Has this whole issue been politicized?
No, the first reason is what I have just spoken about, because he promised. The second part of it is we should not politicize this thing, because one, it is the reality of life. Go to the ground. What Kenyans are getting on the ground. They are suffering, yes. How can you transport passengers from point A to point B with that kind of price of fuel. It is impossible. So if you again lay burden to the passengers, they will also not take matatus to travel from point A to point B.
Okay.
The majority of them, like what you have seen you saying, it is a walking nation. They will just prefer to walk. Again, on our case, we depend on the application companies to raise the price, to adjust the prices. If they fail to adjust the prices, who will carry the burden of the cost of fuel? It is the driver. So we are requesting the government to look at it, and also the application companies. And this time we are not talking in peace, we just want actions to be done.
Simple. Asante sana. Justin Nyaga is the chairman of the Organization of Online Drivers. He says his members will be out of the streets tomorrow. They won't be working in solidarity with their counterparts in the Matatu sector. But at the end of the day, their issue is a price adjustment by the ride-hailing apps, but equally a reduction of fuel, because at the end of the day, the driver will carry the cost. Asante sana for your time.
Thank you
Hoping
so
for
much.
the deliberations with government officials to yield results, because Kenyans are, it's a walking nation, as we've mentioned, and it's
Yeah.
quite unfortunate.
Okay, thank you so
Asante sana. Thank you for your time. Well, we now take a short break right here on KTN Prime. Up next, the latest in the world of business.